But here we are in another fine Friday morning. And this is just that little bit earlier on a Friday morning, which is good because we're all up greeting the sun and having a good time. Isn't that your motto for life, Pat? Up
Absolutely.
early,
Up,
have a good
well, I
time.
don't get up early, but I have this idea. I've been trying to train my brain to say, look, see every morning, look positive, think positive, and enjoy your day, because the alternative isn't worth thinking about.
Did you see that actually that thing about the that woman Grace O'Malley something where the killings were in Nottingham, where she gave
Yeah,
a talk and her son gave a little talk to the big crowd. Very good. The son said, exactly what you've said. Enjoy every moment, enjoy all your relationships, because you never know when they're going to be taken away from you. That's the best
absolutely.
advice I can think of. But it's hard sometimes. You forget, you get so used to things. It's just another bloody day. They're miraculous, every one
Uh,
of them. Okay, let's start with hard topic, and that hard topic is Boris Johnson, who has been high in the news this week because he's going away. What do you think? Will we
yeah.
see the back of him permanently, Pat, or will we?
Well, I don't know about that, Jed, but I was thinking, in a Northern Ireland context or an Ireland context, you know, um, at one stage the DUP saw him as their best friend. I will never put a border down the Irish Sea, and I won't do this and do that. And he was lauded and feted at the DUP conference and whatever. Right. So his relationship certainly soured when he agreed the EU deal for the protocol. And Jude, I was watching a lot of stuff yesterday. Now there's a free vote on Monday, and I was the wife actually pointed out to me. She says, this is the ability to or the potential to split the Tory party right down the middle, because a lot of the people who got elected at the last run out were
Mm-hmm.
based on Johnson's popularity. And when you now here comes the thing. A lot of them are going to lose their seats at the next election, and they are sort of acolytes of Johnson. So that's the first thing. That's a big problem for Sunak. And there's going to be a free vote, I think, on Monday. But the bottom line of it all, Jude, let's stick to the substantive point. Boris Johnson basically laid his way through the whole Partygate that okay, you saw me with a glass of whiskey in my hand, but I really don't drink, and I really wasn't at a party, and it didn't really happen. And all these people are making allegations. It's all about Brexit, and they're out to do me, assassinate me, and etc. 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 And even though the evidence of your eyes are there, don't believe it. I am a man of integrity, etc. 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 You could keep going. You know where I'm going with all this. The bottom line of it all is he laid through his teeth. The committee said he lied through his teeth. They said he was almost delusional, that in his own mind, he thinks he did nothing wrong. But then, of course, when the committee report, apparently they do the sort of procedure thing is to give the person who as the report is on, they give him advanced copy of the report. And what does Johnson do? He breaks all privileges. He basically leaks the report last Thursday and Friday, and gives was it a 30,000 word or something, or 15,000 or 1,500 word response to it, and basically to intimidate the committee. So they did, when they heard that, they decided that they would increase the suspension to 90 days. And of course, then Boris jumped before he was pushed. But
Well,
Jude, if
yeah.
if the Brits believe in procedure and tradition and all the rest, Boris Johnson is just throwing their whole the procedures and privileges of the British parliamentary life out the window.
You
It's
don't
all about
think
him.
you don't think that what Jacob Rees-Mogg, and I know we don't like Jacob Rees-Mogg, but he said it was a vindictive report. Uh, was
He
there
did.
any
He
air of
would.
vindictiveness about it?
Dude, I watched the guy, Gito O'Hara. He was on last night in
Yeah.
Question Time. It was the most disingenuous sort of line of it. He kept referring to it as Harriet Harman's report or
Mm.
committee.
Mm.
Here's the point: when it's an MP if it's a Tory MP, the chairperson of the committee is always Labour. If it's a Labour MP, the chairperson is always a Tory, and that's tradition. It always has been thus. But here's the thing, and he refused to mention about 4 different times that they're the majority. It's a majority Tory committee, and they were excoriating about Johnson. And now there was an SNP guy. Apparently, he wanted Johnson expelled from Parliament. But Jude, here's the thing. Apparently, there are now 16 further parties that the committee have, I think, forward information to the police to investigate. The other thing that I think, see the Metropolitan Police, Jude. Anybody said, well, the police didn't find anything. The police weren't looking for anything. In fact, they deliberately ran away from it. That's where he criticized a dick. Remember, had he resigned, they were so weak. The Metropolitan Police didn't want to take on the establishment whatsoever. They ran away from. So with this sort of thing that some Tories are hiding behind, the police, all he was fined was £150 fine, and that's what the police found. The police ran away from it and ran away from it and ran away from it, and everybody knows that.
I do think, though, that while I agree with just about everything you've said, I think there is a little element of take that from the committee. Like, for example, they took his pass, I think, didn't they? He's not allowed to, free pass and wander around. That sounds a wee bit, rubbing it in. Having said that, of course, Johnson has plunged from the heights to a canyon of outrage now where it's everybody's fault but his. He's so like Trump, so like him.
Absolutely.
When he loses something, it's everybody else's fault, not his. And he didn't really lose it. He didn't, because he never did anything wrong. I think you're right about, well, it's a toss-up between, there's certainly going to be a split. There is a split in the Tory party, because some people see what he has done as rubbish and terrible. On the other hand, he's the guy who won all the seats back then, as you've said. Yeah, so he is a vote magnet. And a vote magnet is very hard to turn down if you're up against it, as they will be next couple of years or next year, is it? So I think I suspect, it's hard to believe, but I suspect he'll be back. And he models himself on Churchill, and Churchill's great time came when he came back. So, we could see him again, despite the fact that he is outrageous.
Just go back on that part you said about the committee. Johnson, no wonder the committee took a certain view. There were serious attempts to intimidate them. Johnson referred to him as a kangaroo court. He said they were basically delusional. He accused them of being vindictive and all the rest. They said this was an attack on democracy or the democratic principle. This guy, they're saying he misled Parliament and deliberately misled Parliament.
Yeah,
and he lied to them as a committee.
How did he intimidate them, Pat? Where was the intimidation? But I was interested in that. What did he do that intimidated them or attempted to intimidate them?
He was making comments in public about the committee and about the fact that Harriet Harman was the deputy leader of the committee, and his friends and the media were sort of saying it's a kangaroo court and all this sort of stuff. They've had to get extra security, Jude. He was sort of basically inciting sort of subtly his friends and all. If you listen to Nadine Dorries and Jacob Rees-Mogg and all the rest of it, Jude, this was a committee set up by the House of Commons. It reached the findings, and it looks like the committee are the ones now to blame rather than Boris Johnson.
Yeah, but
from certain Tories.
Yeah, but is that intimidation? His leaking of the thing and his caustic remarks on it and so on. But that's not really intimidation, because.
But if you publish, if you put an articles in the Daily Mail saying these people are engaged in a kangaroo court against the most popular politician in history, the guy who delivered Brexit, who was out front in Ukraine, who led our campaign over COVID. He's a great hero, and these pygmies are trying to bring down this giant of a man. He's our hero, etc. And that's been going on for months.
But you see, I don't see that as intimidation. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's what they're thinking of. I was trying to pin that down.
If you remember the committee, Jude, and you lived in England, and that's going on all the time, I'd say you would seriously take it as intimidation.
Sure, they must have known in advance of becoming members of the committee that they're going to get all the flack thrown at them possible. And that's what the Daily Mail does. That's its job, That's its nature.
It was more than Daily Mail. It was the Telegraph, a few articles as well.
Yeah. I don't know if I classify that as intimidation. I think I just take that as usual biff bash. But I do think that they were courageous in the detail and the lack of fuzziness about what they said. You know, it's 100% clear. And I really liked that. I thought that was courageous of them, and that was very good.
What they said, there was a guy on yesterday, Jude, one of the pundits, I genuinely don't remember which one, said they almost anticipated the criticism, you know, that would come from certain sections of the Tory media and the politicians. And they said the report nearly, for you know, had a lot of that off at the pass. They sort of anticipated they said the detail in the report absolutely excellent. They even went, Jude, to the room where the party was held and measured the room. They said, you know, Boris was trying to claim I was not in close proximity, and they said it was impossible not to be in close proximity. And then the glass of whiskey in his hand. No, it wasn't really a glass of whiskey. I really don't drink. But the other thing as well, Jude, here's my final point on this. If I was editor of the Dairy Journal, and see if we were saying, under strictest rules, we were not allowed to have a party anywhere in the building. And if I'm standing in the reporter's office with a glass of whiskey and 10 or 12 reporters are sitting there, am I at that meeting or am I not at that meeting? And when I'm telling other people, by the way, you cannot bury your dead other than 10 people. You cannot go visit your dying grandmother. You can't visit your dying wife and all the rest of it. But it's all right for me as editor of the Dairy Journal to go to a party, but don't you do that. He was...
And the table was covered in bottles.
And he did that. And then he tries to turn around and says, no, by the way, no, I wasn't really at a party, you know?
Yeah. I think his effort is to be like Trump, well, even more than Trump, is for people to say, he is a scallywag. You know, he really is such a scallywag. You know, affectionate rogue. And look at the way he goes out for his run in the morning, and he give a little wave. And, you know, and he even looks like Churchill. So, you know, I think he's working very hard at that notion of himself as a man maligned. And I suspect he will have ambitions for the future.
Unless Churchill came back, I needed a Second World War.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
I would love to know what.
I don't know if it'd be worth paying the price myself. Well, I do know, but I hope it never comes to that. Okay, let's go on to the next thing. And this is such an old story, but God, it has, I don't know what you would call it. It's sort of chilling echo to it. It's the hooded men who have got their apology. Tell me this, Pat. The hooded men, of course, are the men who were waterboarded and all sorts of stuff for hours, essentially tortured. Only the EU didn't have the balls to say that they were tortured. It said inhumane treatment or something like that. But did they get anything besides an apology?
Donald Rumsfeld, remember the Brits and the Americans have these nice sort of euphemistic terms for. Donald Rumsfeld said that waterboarding several of the people they arrested during the Iraq and Afghanistan, all that sort of waterboarding. He said it was enhanced techniques. I remember a lawyer saying, if Mr. Rumsfeld does not think as torture, I invite him to come along and we'll waterboard him. And if we're finished, he doesn't think it's torture, well, fair enough. Rumsfeld didn't take it up. Jude, the hooded men were made to stand literally for days against the wall with their arms and legs spread. They were put on oversized jumpsuits type thing, overalls, where they were not allowed to go to the toilet. So they had to defecate and urinate inside the trousers. They were deprived of sleep. They were deprived of food. White noise was played into the room where they were. If they fell down, they were battered until they got back up again, unless they went unconscious. One man lost 16 pounds in 1 week. Now, Jude, if that I love this. The Supreme Court, what was it, 2 years ago, said something along the lines, it would be considered torture in the modern day. Jude, it was torture when it was done. I thought that was the most sort of you know, I thought that was disgustingly. It would be considered in the modern day. This would be considered torture. It was torture then too.
Yeah,
Jude,
but you see,
it was totally
that's in keeping with the EU rejection of it as torture as well. You know, they just don't want to claim it. That's what it is. I wonder. First,
didn't want to fall out with the Brits, Jude.
What's that?
No, the EU didn't want to fall out with the Brits back in the day because everybody was new in the EU.
But tell us this: did they get anything besides the apology? Because frankly, I know that the Bloody Sunday people got an apology, but I mean, there's some among the relatives of Bloody Sunday people who think that's a joke. You kill people, and then 40 years later you say, "Oh, sorry." They want more than that. I think they're right. Is that the case with the hooded men? Were they compensated in any way? Are the relatives compensated in any way? Or is it simply stopping at, "Oh, we're sorry for what we did"?
Jude, I don't know. I see. I have a big thing now. See, when the troubles were going on, everything that was said was, I know that the people in the south and the nationalists in the north and for overseas and in Britain, the whole propaganda were there were only one set of bad guys, and it was IRA. And see, everything that they claim, it's IRA propaganda and all the rest. And so and these people who believe IRA are dupes, and the evil Republican movement. And see, by the way, see those Northerners up there, they're all mad bastards, and they love violence, and so on, so on, so on. And it played out. Now we have a conveyor belt 50 years later, way too late. Oh, wait a minute, they were telling the truth. Collusion was real. Bloody Sunday was real. Ballymurphy was real. The hooded men were real. Why did all those things? And the people living on the ground and nationalist community knew exactly what was going on, and that's why they joined the IRA, and that's why they supported the Republican movement, and the Republican movement were telling the truth. But nowadays the Brits. Oh, and go and tell me someone as well. Why are all these coroners? Why is it taking 40 and 50 years to get coroners' reports and all the rest? And it's a rhetorical question, Jude. I'll tell you the answer, and you know it as well as I do. The British state is refusing to give information. Anything that might be considered state security or compromising the actions of the forces of state is not being made available. It's disgusting. It's totally unfair, and it's against every principle of justice.
But of course, they can't afford to. They can't afford to. I mean, that would show them as a kind of dirty war people that they were, and that's why they say, that Scappaticci. They were fearful that Scappaticci would be somehow exposed, or that what he did would be made public, and the extent to which he was their agent would be emphasized. That just couldn't happen. Too big to fail. Too big to fail, as they say. But tell me this: see, at the time, Pat, I can't remember, but at the time, was there a class of nationalists who believed that this was IRA propaganda, that these hooded men were tortured? Was there a strand of nationalism?
One of our contributors some weeks back, or a month or two back, was Gabriel McCarthy, who's a guy from Belfast who emigrated to Canada, and I think in the 1970s. And he had a very interesting post on social media the other night. He said, when I look back, he said he back in the day actually canvassed for the SDLP. He seems to have taken a somewhat different line now. He says people like, and he admired Seamus Mallon, but he pointed out that Mallon actually supported the UDR and stuff like this on the basis that a lot of the Republicans were telling lies and all the rest of it. Now, I am only stating what Gabriel put on his post the other night, but I think that there was a lot of people at the time in the nationalist community, the sort of soft nationalists and the people who didn't like trouble and just wanted to put their heads down and get on with it. Dude, they were easily convinced. Jude, I remember, I'm not naming her because her family's still out, but she was quite a well-off woman in Derry, and she was involved for the SDLP. And one day, she came down to my office when I was at the Derry Journal, and she's some Sinn Féin election people had been stopped and arrested by the British Army. She says if they didn't get into trouble, they wouldn't need to arrest them. And I was thinking, yeah, you're driving your Mercedes, and these guys are walking in their jeans and all the rest of it. The British Army don't stop you, Jude. It's back to that old one, and it took me. One of the wee girls in the office said to me, the famous line. It was a sort of a wake up moment, eureka moment for me. She says, "Pat, wait a minute, there's them and us." And of course, I've been from Donegal and been totally naive back in the early days. I says, "Do you mean Unionists and Catholic and Unionists?" She says, "No." She says, the sort of the Culmore Road set and we who live on the Bogside. There was a divide within the and they saw the whole thing very, very differently.
Yes.
They were the people whose houses were getting raided. The British Army pulling them out of bed in the middle of the night. They didn't go up to the doctor's houses and up in the Culmore Road.
Yeah,
Definitely not.
that was the thing I was getting at, Pat, because I remember well coming back in '79 from Canada, and every claim like that Republicans made about torture and abuse and so on, no, people didn't. The middle class that I associated with, if they mentioned the topic, it'd be with a bunch of corner boys, or I mean,
I
yeah,
got that
that's what
all the
they
time as
say.
well.
That's what
Yeah.
they say. Yeah, they don't have to be out. If they didn't join the IRA, that wouldn't be happening. The whole sort of sentiment was towards they got as much as they deserved. And it took so
Yeah.
long. I mean, it's almost unbelievable. Maybe there was a fear. Maybe would there have been behind it a fear that if they come out and said that's appalling and that should never have happened, that they'd be seen as, I suspect they would have been seen as being on the side of the IRA. Because in more recent times, the same sort of thing has happened in a sense to me, where I criticized something
Yeah.
and I was, essentially I was saying something that was totally unacceptable, which seemed to be in some way sympathetic towards Republicans and the violence of the IRA, which I wasn't.
Yeah, Jude, I think you've nailed it because that's exactly what. Have you come out and said anything at all that supported um, an IRA or a Republican position? You were considered a fellow traveller. Now,
Yeah,
Jude, let
yeah,
me make it clear. I knew a couple of people who had close friends, relatives, and jailed, who wouldn't go visit them in Lankesh because they didn't want to be associated. No, maybe not associated. Maybe that's unfair, but they
mm,
didn't want to be. They figured they'd be targeted then. But oh, wait a minute, he's going to visit X in
yeah,
Lankesh,
yeah,
so
yeah,
keep an
yeah.
eye out on him. And the next thing,
Uh-huh.
your house gets raided, or you get stopped in your car, or your kids are put up against the wall. Dude, all that happened. Like let's be very clear about that. And a lot of people remember you said one time, and someone that came to me the last day. Uh, one of the reasons I was asked by a certain person about why so many people, took a certain position. Dude, I think a lot of people would have joined the IRA but for one very reason: lack of courage.
Exactly, exactly,
So many people
exactly.
and were so angry. You know, Dude, but why didn't such and such? Why didn't more people join it? Because I remember reading a book. I can't remember. I think it might have been Peter Taylor, where he quoted somebody, BBC's Peter, the average lifespan for when you joined the IRA was 7 years.
22.
That was the
Yeah,
maximum. You
yeah.
were either dead or in jail within 7 years.
Uh,
And
you know,
often considerably less.
yeah, exactly. But I think that I never hear that talked about. People talk about, well, they had a choice. This is a big thing now, people had a choice joining the IRA or not joining the IRA. And the people who didn't join, that is, say, the Catholics, nationalists that didn't join, are seen as good people who want to unite in Ireland, maybe, but they're not going to go and kill their neighbors in order to have it happen. The truth of the matter is, I'm convinced of this. In let me be generous and say 80% of cases, the reason they didn't get actively involved was they didn't want to die. They didn't want to be put in prison.
Absolutely.
There was a fear, and it's a very natural fear too. Geez, I mean, the guys who did it were. It's hard to ignore the kind of courage that took at the time. But there's a lot of people who
Yeah.
now pass it off as principle, and I think that's sort of disgusting. To say, we chose a
Yeah.
peaceful path because we're principled. I believe people like John Hume, for example, would have done it because they on principle. But I think there was a lot of Catholics, a lot of nationalists
Mm.
who stayed clear of the area because they were afraid. Also, of course, there was the class thing, as I mentioned. The notion that those are
Yeah.
working class people. They wouldn't even have said working class people. Backstreet boys, corner boys, ne'er do wells,
Yeah.
always up to something. Sure, his grandfather was the same.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah. I heard that. I heard that so often. Yeah. So, just when you mentioned someone, just go back, revert to something there. You said Capatici. There was a thing on prime time on Monday night
I
or
saw it.
Tuesday night. I think it might have been about Capatici. Yeah, and it was an interesting program in the sense, Jude. Like, uh, Jude, you know, as somebody said one time, and I can't remember again, I should take notes for these things, but I don't. I just watch things and then, you know, like if I was an academic, I would take notes and said, and I'd give you chapter and verse, but I'm not an academic. So anyway,
Right.
anyway, there was a guy on one night, and he said, basically, he said they're claiming that these murders were committed by the IRA. He says, no, they weren't. He says those murders were committed by British agents. The British were running Scappaticci and another guy whose name escapes me in the Nutting Squad, and they knew who was going to live and who was going to die. So, Jude, it wasn't the IRA who was running those, and that's why, Jude. See this whole thing about. I watched Lord Kane last night on The View. Now, he seems a very decent man. I have to sort of say that, and he seems an honourable man, and so on, so on. And he, like I Mayor Device came straight out last night about Boris Johnson. He wasn't pulling any punches there. But this sort of thing about the legacy, Nuala alone was on this legacy bill. Jude, the whole, let's get this on the record. The whole aim of the legacy bill is to, get stuff like the role of Freddie Scappaticci down, get it out of the way, to get rid of the whole thing about the role of the British state. As you said about the hooded men, they'll get an apology. Will they get anything else? I doubt it very much. But I guess there's nobody going to be convicted of it. The other thing, the PSNI apologised to the hooded men. The government still haven't apologised, and they're hiding behind this thing. Oh, there's still some legal cases outstanding. Nuala Alone pointed out as well that this new amended legacy bill, unless a case is finished now or got a sort of definite finishing line, there are going to be no new one started. So, Jude, there are people who have no idea who killed their children, their husbands, their wives, or whatever, by state forces, and the state are the very ones that are going to close all this down.
Am I right in thinking, Pat, that cases that are in progress at the moment, if when that deadline comes, that they'll not be furthered? Will they be finished, or will the whole lot stop?
No, basically, Jude, unless I can't, unless they've got a term for it, unless there's some sort of definite finish line, they're just going to be dropped.
Oh, geez, I
think in other words, and by the way, Jude, a lot of families have spent fortunes legally going, getting reviews and getting cases and gone along to inquests and looking for forensic evidence, going to solicitors and all. Jude, they're not going to get that money back.
Yeah.
The state will just sort of do a guillotine motion, and that's it.
Yeah. Let's go back to very briefly to the primetime program. I thought it was very well done. Actually, I thought it was really sort of genuine. The guy talking about his brother and him being in jail and him having been caught as an IRA man on his way to attack a UDR soldier. So I thought, in terms of the program, it was a good program. But the question that struck me at first was, why are they doing that program? Why did they choose that? It wasn't as if something new about Scappaticci had emerged, or someone had revealed something about the whole Scappaticci case. But why was that? Do you remember? Why did they say?
No, I think it was it wasn't aimed at an audience, a northern. This was aimed at a southern audience to sort of, I presume, to suggest them this is how dirty this was.
So yeah, but there's no hook for it, Pat. As a newspaper man, you would know that usually if you're going to run an item, there's some sort of hook, like something has been happening, and then you run the item because there's a link between the two. I'm looking for the hook that brought that program on primetime, and I can't.
Well, I presume the hook was the guy Kearney, about his brother. That was new. I've never seen that before.
No, I haven't either.
I know, Jude. We have all seen it before, Jude. But hey, hold on. If you're living down in Laois or Longford or Waterford or those people haven't a clue what's going on. So to them, it would be new. It's like we've got tired old eyes when it comes to stuff like this.
Oh, well,
no, Jude, you're missing a point. Stood up. It was aimed. Down south. It wasn't aimed at us.
All right, it was. I agree with you. But down south, they've been conditioned to a point where they don't want to see that stuff.
Absolutely.
Any story about the IRA, I would have thought they would have at least some semblance of a contemporary incident. That something had said, or something was said, or something was done, and then say, well, let's look at that. Here's an example of this, and then they give you that. In short, I thought it was a good program. Probably a fair program too, but I couldn't for the life of me see anything that had happened recently that justified putting it on. I just didn't seem to
No,
meet
I agree
the
with that. I'm
journalistic
not
sense.
arguing at that point. But I think the guy said,
well, let me just finish
no,
this
but
one.
remember,
Let me finish
he
this
said,
one, Pat.
but remember, he said, if my brother had been informant, I would have shot him. No, I think that was the whole idea about the dirty war.
Well, fair enough. I'm still a bit dubious. I'll tell you what I think.
I agree with you.
I think as the nearer we
I
come
genuinely
to
think.
but I think the nearer we come to an election in the South, the more programs like that you'll see, and you mightn't find them always as sort of even-handed and insightful as that one was.
Yeah.
Because obvious reasons, they do want to see Sinn Féin in incidentally, that guy Brendan O'Leary, remember I was telling you about Brendan O'Leary had a sort of a Zoom program on? You know, Professor Brendan O'Leary, the guy, is an expert in polling and so on. He made that point, and I thought it was a good one, that the media in the South really is starved of stuff about the North. They're not interested in the North. They tend to avoid it. And he says that's a bad thing. If you're looking for unity, there should be better coverage on both sides. Okay, we're getting short of time, so let's move on to I think it's the last item. It'll have to be probably, and that is one that, again, God, you think you've seen it all with things like the Hooded Man, and then you see this Noah Donohoe case, the young fella, 14-year-old, who was going to St. Malachy, cycled his bike over to North Belfast, was it? And his body a few days later was found in a drain. His naked body was found in a drain. Now, at first, an awful lot of people were talking about this, and then people stopped talking about it. And as I understood it, it was because the mother of the boy was engaged in some sort of legal process, and as a result, to talk about it could pollute the waters or block investigation or whatever. Would that be right, Pat, or have I overstated?
Yeah, it's my understanding as well. Yeah. I think it was June 2020. He was 14. He left. Yeah, apparently it on his. Was it St. Malachy's Blazer or something? Now, was it head towards East Belfast or North Belfast? I'm not 100% certain. Jude, but anyway, bottom line is his body was found in a storm drain. And Jude, and please, I don't mean this. The cops, that wee girl there, the 21-year-old, and there's two guys charged with murder. The cops right away, there was all guns blazing, big sort of stuff, and two guys in court. Right, I'm not saying they're innocent or guilty. I'm not all I'm saying. Just no. Here we are, 3 years later. Noah Donohoe, not there doesn't seem to be any movement in the case. It seems to have died. Jude, if this was on quote unquote mainland Britain and a wee 14-year-old boy went missing in these sort of circumstances, there would have been a massive hue and cry. What I get the impression, rightly or wrongly, it's almost that a lid's been put on this case. I don't understand why.
One of the reasons, as I understood it, I did a bit of research on it, was that the mother put in a request to have a jury involved in this, I think, in the inquest. And that meant that the inquest was delayed. I didn't know you could have a jury in an inquest, but it seems to be that's the case. If I'm wrong, I'm sure some of our viewers will tell me. But they said that was one of the reasons why it was held up. And if that's a reason, then fair enough. But there's two things.
It shouldn't take that long, should it? 3-4 years to get a jury?
No way. One of the things is there's apparently two CCTV pieces of footage, and they haven't. The police have, I think, parted with one of them, but they won't hand over the other one. And they're saying there's too much of it. It's nothing to do with the case. Well, that's not good enough. That simply isn't good enough.
No. I remember the inquiry there in London there last week. The chairperson said, "Let me decide what's relevant." Well, the coroner should decide what's relevant. Remember the British government took a case against whatever, I can't remember the inquiry, and so they're not willing to hand over WhatsApps from Boris Johnson. They said it's irrelevant. The chairperson, Lord, she's a lady such, and she says, "Let me decide what's relevant." In other words, is there something the cops want to hide in that CCTV?
Right. You get that suspicion. The lawyer, one of the lawyers for the family, for the mother, I suppose, has said that they want that second piece of footage, if only to put issues to bed. if it's only to disprove some
Yeah.
things, I mean, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
there's nothing to hide. I frankly am pretty dubious at the moment, which is a sad note to end on, Pat. But at the same time, I don't want these injustices in the world to spoil your weekend. Put them aside, put them out of your head if you can, and go out and enjoy your weekend. At our age,
All right, Jude.
you've got to take every minute
That's
and enjoy it as
the
best
best
you
we
can.
can do.
Okay, Pat.
Aye.